My dear friends, have you ever noticed that silence can speak louder than words? Sometimes the most powerful answer is not an argument, not a reaction, not even an explanation, but pure silence. In a world where everyone is rushing to be heard, silence has become rare, yet it is the most powerful response we can give, because silence is not weakness, silence is not ignorance, silence is not escape, silence is wisdom in action. Today, let us explore why silence is the most powerful response. My dear friends, have you ever noticed how easily we drain our energy? Not by running, not by working, not even by facing big challenges, but simply by talking unnecessarily. The words take energy. Arguing takes energy. Defending, explaining, reacting, all of these consume so much of our mental and emotional strength. Think about this. Have you ever had a small argument with someone, maybe at home, maybe at work, maybe even with a friend? The argument might have lasted for just 5 minutes, but afterwards, the whole day you felt exhausted. You kept replaying the words in your mind. Why did he say that? I should have replied this way. Next time, I'll tell her this, and suddenly, your entire day is consumed not by the actual problem, but by the energy you lost in that argument. Silence, my friends, is like a shield for your energy. When you choose silence instead of reaction, you are not suppressing yourself. You are protecting yourself. You are saving your strength for things that truly matter. Imagine your energy like water in a pot. If you pour it into every small crack, every little hole, soon you will have nothing left. But if you preserve it, you can use it to grow flowers, cook meals, and nourish life. In the same way, if we waste our energy in meaningless debates, gossip, or arguments, we will have no energy left for growth, for creativity, for love, for kindness. Let me share a story. Once, a monk was walking through a village. A man came to him and started abusing him with harsh words. He called him names, mocked his simple clothes, and insulted him again and again. The monk listened in silence and kept walking. After some time, one of the villagers asked, "Why did you not reply? Don't you feel hurt?" The monk smiled and said, "If someone gives you a gift, but you do not accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The villager said, "It belongs to the giver." The monk said, "Exactly. His words were his gift. I did not accept them. So they still belong to him. I keep my peace. I save my energy." This, my friends, is the power of silence. When you refuse to react to negativity, you are not weak, you are wise. You are saving your precious energy for something greater. Life is too short to waste energy on things that don't help you grow. Choose silence and watch how much strength, clarity, and peace you gain. My dear friends, so often in life, people mistake silence for weakness. They say, "Oh, he stayed quiet because he had nothing to say," or "She stayed silent because she was scared." But the truth is completely the opposite. Staying silent in a situation where you could have shouted, where you could have reacted, where you could have crushed someone with your words, takes incredible inner strength. Anyone can explode in anger. Anyone can argue endlessly. Anyone can raise their voice. But only the strong can remain calm, collected, and silent. It is not the absence of words, it is the presence of wisdom. Think about it. When a dog barks at an elephant, does the elephant stop to bark back? No. The elephant keeps walking because it knows its size, it knows its strength. The elephant doesn't need to prove itself by reacting. In the same way, when you remain silent, it does not mean you are powerless. It means you know your worth. You don't need to waste your dignity in proving yourself to someone who cannot see your value. Silence in this way is a declaration: I know who I am, and I don't need to fight to prove it. Let me share a real life example. Once, two colleagues at a workplace had a disagreement. One began raising his voice, insulting the other, trying to humiliate him in front of everyone. The other man, instead of shouting back, quietly listened and said nothing. People in the office thought he had lost the argument. But over time, they noticed something powerful. The one who shouted lost everyone's respect, while the one who stayed silent earned admiration. People said, if he can remain that calm under attack, he must have great inner control. In the end, silence spoke louder than the loud voice. Sometimes silence is the highest form of reply you can give to arrogance. Why? Because when you argue with someone who is not ready to listen, you lower yourself to their level. But when you remain silent, you rise above. That silence says, I refuse to let your words disturb my peace. I refuse to let your negativity define my energy. Isn't that true strength? And dear friends, remember this: a sword may be sharp, but it needs constant fighting to prove itself. Silence, on the other hand, doesn't need to prove anything. It simply stands as strength in itself. When you practice silence in moments of provocation, you are not avoiding the battle. You are showing that you are already victorious within. Silence is not weakness, silence is controlled power. My dear friends, one of the greatest lessons we can learn about silence is this: it prevents escalation. You see, every conflict, every fight, every argument is like a fire. At first, it's just a spark, a small misunderstanding, a single harsh word, a little disagreement. Now, if you add fuel to that spark with more words, more anger, more shouting, it grows into a raging fire that can burn relationships, burn peace of mind, and sometimes even burn entire families apart. But if, in that very moment, one person chooses silence, the spark has no fuel. And without fuel, the fire dies on its own. Imagine two people standing in a room with dry hay. One of them lights a match. If the other person brings gasoline, the whole place will explode. But if the other person brings nothing, no wood, no oil, no reaction, the flame flickers for a moment and then goes out. This is what silence does. Silence takes away the fuel from conflict. It refuses to feed anger. It refuses to feed negativity. And in doing so, it protects peace. Think about a husband and wife in an argument. The husband says something harsh. The wife immediately replies with something harsher. The husband takes it up another notch, and soon both are shouting. And then a small issue that could have been resolved in a minute becomes a wound that lasts for days. Now, imagine if in that very moment, when the husband says something harsh, the wife chooses silence. She doesn't reply in anger. She takes a deep breath. The husband's words hang in the air for a moment, but then silence absorbs them. There is nothing more to fight with. The storm calms down. Later, when emotions have cooled, a calm and kind conversation can solve the problem. That's the power of silence. It prevents escalation and saves relationships from unnecessary scars. Once, a king asked his wise minister, "What is the most powerful weapon a man can use against anger?" The minister replied, "Silence." The king was surprised. He said, "Not a sword, not an army." The minister smiled and said, "When someone is angry and you remain silent, their anger has nowhere to go. Like a ball thrown against a wall, it comes back to them. But if you argue, their anger finds a new home in your heart, and then both hearts burn." The king nodded in deep understanding. He realized that silence is not passive, It is the most active shield against escalation. My dear friends, let us ask ourselves, how many times in our life have we made a small problem bigger simply because we could not remain silent? How many relationships have been wounded? How many friendships broken? How many families divided? Not because of the original issue, but because of the unnecessary escalation that came after. If we learn the art of silence, we can protect not only our peace, but also the peace of those around us. Silence is not about losing a fight. It's about refusing to start a war. Silence is not weakness. It is wisdom that says, I will not throw fuel on this fire. My dear friends, silence is not just the absence of words. It is the presence of clarity. You see, when our mind is filled with noise, when we keep reacting, shouting, debating, explaining, we do not give ourselves the chance to see things as they truly are. Silence is like still water. When the lake is disturbed, you cannot see your reflection. But when the water is calm and silent, suddenly you can see yourself clearly. In the same way, silence allows us to see reality without the distortion of anger, ego, or emotion. Think about it. How many times have you spoken in a rush of emotion, out of anger or hurt or even pride, only to regret it later? In the heat of the moment, words come like arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. And later, when you calm down, you realize you did not even mean half the things you said. Isn't it true? The silence we did not choose in that moment could have saved us from guilt and regret. Silence gives the space to pause, to breathe, to think, and to respond with clarity instead of reacting blindly. Let me share a story with you. There was once a disciple who approached his master with great anger. He said, Master, my friend has betrayed me. I want to break all ties with him. Tell me, what should I do? The master listened and then said, My child, come back tomorrow. The disciple was confused. He wanted an answer immediately, but out of respect, he obeyed. The next day, he returned calmer than before. He said, Master, I have thought about it. I don't want to break ties anymore. I just want to speak to my friend calmly. The master smiled and said, Yesterday, if I had given you an answer, you would have acted out of anger. But today, after a night of silence, you can see clearly. This is why silence is the most powerful guide. It shows you what you cannot see in the heat of the moment. Clarity, my friends, does not come when we speak. It comes when we stop speaking. When we close our mouth, we open our mind. Silence allows us to listen to our inner voice, the voice that often gets drowned in the noise of the world. In silence, we can ask ourselves, what is really important here? Is this fight worth my peace? Is this argument worth damaging my relationship? What will truly serve me in the long run? And when those answers come, they bring peace with them. In fact, even in the busiest parts of our life, silence is what brings direction. Leaders, saints, philosophers, all of them took moments of silence before making their greatest decisions. Why? Because silence connects us to wisdom. Silence gives us a higher perspective. Words are like clouds, but silence is like the sky. Clouds come and go, but the vast sky remains. When we are silent, we rise above the passing clouds of emotion and stand in the vast clarity of truth. So remember this, dear friends. Silence is not about avoiding the world. It is about seeing the world more clearly. It is not running away from reality. It is looking at reality with fresh eyes. In silence, confusion melts away and truth shines like the sun. The next time you feel the urge to reply instantly, pause, breathe, be silent. For in that silence, you will find clarity, and in that clarity, you will find the right path forward. My dear friends, one of the greatest gifts silence gives us is that it protects our relationships. Relationships are not destroyed by the big storms of life as much as they are damaged by the tiny cracks created by unnecessary words. Many of us believe that relationships end because of huge betrayals, massive mistakes, or unthinkable conflicts. But if you look closely, most relationships are wounded by small things. A harsh word said in anger, a sarcastic comment, a careless response. These small words, repeated over time, cut deeper than we realize. Silence in those moments acts as a shield. It saves us from saying something we will regret. It saves the bond from unnecessary wounds. Think about a simple example. A husband comes home tired after a long day. He is irritated and, without meaning to, he snaps at his wife. The wife has two choices. She can immediately snap back, doubling his irritation, and within minutes the house turns into a battlefield. Or she can remain silent for a moment, allowing the storm of his irritation to pass. Later, when both are calm, she can speak her heart gently. Which choice will protect the relationship? Which choice will deepen love? Silence, my friends, is not the absence of communication. It is a delay that protects communication. It is waiting for the right time instead of wasting words at the wrong time. There is a story of a saint who once told his students, "Never speak when you are angry. If you feel the fire of anger burning in you, keep your lips sealed." One student asked, "But master, what if I am right? What if the other person is wrong?" The saint smiled and said, "If you are right, silence will protect your dignity. If you are wrong, silence will protect your relationship. Either way, silence will protect something precious." Hey, my dear friends, we must realize this truth. Once spoken, words cannot be taken back. They may be forgiven, but they are rarely forgotten. A single harsh sentence can echo in someone's mind for years. Isn't it true? Sometimes we still remember things said to us decades ago, things that left a scar on our heart. Now imagine if, in those moments, the other person had chosen silence instead of sharp words. Imagine how much pain could have been avoided. Silence protects not only the one who chooses it, but also the heart of the one who receives it. Even in friendships, silence plays a powerful role. When two friends disagree, ego often pushes them to win the argument. But winning an argument can mean losing a friend. Silence, on the other hand, allows space for understanding. It says, "I value you more than I value being right in this moment." Isn't that beautiful? In that silence, love survives, respect grows, and the relationship is protected. Silence is also powerful because it communicates in ways words cannot. When someone you love makes a mistake, sometimes silence is more powerful than anger. Silence says, "I am hurt, but I still respect you enough not to insult you." Silence says, "I trust that you will realize your mistake on your own." In this way, silence protects dignity on both sides. It holds the bond together when words could have torn it apart. So, my dear friends, if you want to protect your relationships, whether with family, friends, or loved ones, learn the art of silence. Remember, silence does not mean avoiding communication forever. It means pausing, protecting, and preserving the love that exists between you. Because once a relationship is broken, even if it is repaired, the cracks remain. Silence ensures those cracks never appear. Choose silence in heated moments, and you will find your relationships not only survive, they will blossom with trust, patience, and love. My dear friends, one of the most misunderstood truths about silence is this: silence commands respect. People often think that if we don't reply, we will be taken lightly, or if we stay quiet, people will think we are weak. But in reality, it is the opposite. When you remain silent in moments where everyone expects you to explode, people don't see you as weak. They see you as strong. They see you as someone who has mastery over themselves, someone who does not bend to anger, ego, or provocation. And that, my friends, is where respect is born. Think about it. In a group discussion, if everyone is talking over each other, raising their voices, and fighting to be heard, who stands out? The one who speaks less but speaks with calm authority. Why? Because silence has weight. When a person speaks only after careful silence, people listen with more attention. They know those words are not casual, not emotional, but thoughtful. Isn't it true? The world respects those who don't waste their voice on every little argument, but reserve it for what truly matters. There is an old saying, the loudest one in the room is often the weakest. Have you seen it? People who keep shouting, proving themselves, forcing their words. They may get attention for a moment, but deep down, people don't respect them. On the other hand, the one who stays calm, composed, unshaken, that person earns silent admiration. Respect does not come from noise, it comes from poise. Respect does not come from the volume of your voice, but from the value of your presence. Let me share a story. A wise man was once insulted in front of a large gathering. People waited to see how he would react. Would he shout back? Would he defend himself? But the wise man stayed calm, smiled gently, and said nothing. The insulter grew louder and more aggressive. Still, the wise man remained silent. After some time, the crowd turned, not against the wise man, but against the one shouting. They said, "Enough! Can you not see your words have no effect? You are only making yourself look small, while he grows bigger in our eyes with every passing moment of silence." That day, everyone realized silence commands more respect than the sharpest reply ever could. Even in our daily lives, this is true. When we remain silent in the face of gossip, people see us as dignified. When we remain silent in the face of insults, people see us as composed. When we remain silent instead of arguing over trivial matters, people see us as mature. Silence shows self-control, and self-control is always respected. But remember, my dear friends, silence does not mean you never speak. It means you choose your words carefully, and you choose your moments wisely. When people see that you don't react to every provocation, when they see that you don't waste your words, they automatically respect the moments you do decide to speak. Because your words carry the weight of your silence, and that weight is what makes people listen. So never underestimate the power of silence. It is not emptiness. It is presence. It is not weakness. It is strength. And the more you practice silence, the more respect you will naturally command. Because respect is not demanded by force, it is earned by restraint. And silence, my friends, is the highest form of restraint that wins the deepest form of respect. My dear friends, silence is not just a response, silence is also a teacher. In fact, some of the greatest lessons of life are learned not through words, not through lectures, not through endless discussions, but through the quiet guidance of silence itself. If you look closely, life's most profound wisdom often comes to us when everything outside becomes quiet and everything inside begins to speak. Silence has a way of training us in patience, in tolerance, and in self-control. It teaches us things no textbook ever could, no classroom ever can. Have you ever noticed when we are silent, we begin to hear more? When we stop filling the space with our own words, we suddenly become better listeners. We start noticing details we would otherwise miss. The tone in someone's voice, the emotions in their eyes, the pain hidden behind their smile. Silence teaches us sensitivity. It teaches us to connect not only with words, but with feelings. In fact, sometimes when a friend is suffering, they don't need 100 words from us. They need our silent presence. Our silence teaches us empathy, that being there for someone is often more powerful than saying anything at all. Silence also teaches us patience. My dear friends, in this world of instant replies, instant messages, instant everything, we have forgotten the beauty of waiting. But silence forces us to pause. When we remain silent instead of reacting, we learn the art of giving time for emotions to settle, for thoughts to become clear. Isn't it true that the best decisions of our life often came after we stayed quiet for a while, thought deeply, and then acted? Silence trains us not to rush, not to let emotions drive us blindly. It teaches us that wisdom comes to those who wait. Let me share a story. A disciple once asked his master, "Why do you meditate in silence every day?" The master smiled and pointed at a glass of muddy water. He stirred it and asked the disciple, "Can you see clearly through it?" The disciple said, "No, master, the water is too disturbed." The master then placed the glass on the table and said, "No, wait." Slowly, as the mud settled, the water became clear. The master said, "This is what silence teaches. When your mind is disturbed, you cannot see clearly. But if you remain silent and let time settle your thoughts, clarity appears on its own." Isn't that such a beautiful lesson? Silence teaches us that sometimes doing nothing is the wisest thing to do. Silence also teaches tolerance. When someone insults us, silence teaches us not to react instantly, but to absorb, to endure, to hold back. This doesn't mean we allow injustice. It means we do not let our anger control us. Silence teaches us the strength of restraint, the courage of calmness. When life tests us, silence whispers, "Hold on, this too shall pass." And in holding on, we discover our resilience. Most importantly, silence teaches us self-control. It shows us that not every thought in our mind needs to become a word. Not every emotion needs to become an action. In silence, we learn to master ourselves. And my dear friends, isn't that the greatest education of all? To master yourself. Schools may teach us how to earn a living, but silence teaches us how to live with wisdom, with peace, with dignity. So remember, this silence is not empty. It is full of lessons. Every time you choose silence, you are sitting in the classroom of life, and life itself is teaching you patience, tolerance, empathy, and self-control. And if you learn these lessons well, you will discover that silence has been your greatest teacher all along. My dear friends, silence is often mistaken as emptiness, but the truth is, silence can communicate far more than words ever can. There are moments in life when words fall short, when no sentence, no explanation, no speech is enough to express what we feel. It is in those moments that silence steps in and speaks the loudest. Silence is not the absence of communication, it is a higher form of it. Sometimes silence says, "I love you." Sometimes silence says, "I forgive you." Sometimes silence says, "I am with you." And sometimes silence says, "You cannot hurt me." Isn't it beautiful? Think about this: when a mother holds her child, does she need to say anything to prove her love? No. The warmth of her embrace, the quietness of that bond, speaks volumes more than words ever could. When two lovers sit under the stars, holding hands, their silence is filled with meaning. No words are spoken, yet everything is understood. In fact, my friends, silence is often the most romantic language in the world, because it comes not from the lips, but from the heart. Silence also communicates in times of grief. When someone has lost a loved one, what can words do? No sentence can truly remove their pain. In those moments, our silent presence, our quiet companionship, says more than any lecture about life and death ever could. Isn't it true? When someone is hurting, what they need is not our advice but our presence. Our silence tells them, I may not have answers, but I am here with you. That is the deepest form of compassion, and it requires no words. Let me share a story. A wise man once sat quietly with a friend who was going through deep sorrow. Hours passed, and not a word was spoken. Later, the grieving man said, Thank you, my friend. Your silence was the greatest comfort I could have asked for. If you had tried to explain my pain away with words, I might have felt even more lonely. But your silence made me feel understood. This is the power of silence. It speaks the language of the heart, which words sometimes cannot reach. Silence can also be a powerful communicator in conflict. Imagine being insulted or accused unjustly. If you fight back with words, you create a battle. But if you respond with silence, your silence communicates strength. It says, I am above this. Your words cannot shake me. Silence is not agreement, it is dignity. Silence is not surrender, it is self-respect. And people deep down can feel that. Even those who provoke you, when they see your silence, know in their heart that they cannot touch your inner peace. My dear friends, silence is also the language of the soul. When we sit in prayer and meditation, or even in the quiet of nature, we realize that God, or the universe, or whatever name you give the higher power, does not always speak to us in words. The divine often speaks to us in silence. In that silence, we find answers. In that silence, we feel connected. In that silence, we realize truths we could never discover through endless discussions. This is why saints and sages through the ages have said, learn to listen to silence, for silence is the voice of the soul. So remember, silence communicates in ways that words cannot. It is the language of love, the language of grief, the language of strength, and the language of the spirit. Words may impress the mind, but silence touches the heart. And when hearts are touched, no words are necessary. So, the next time you feel that words are not enough, let silence speak for you. Because silence, my dear friends, communicates more than words ever will. My dear friends, silence is not just about how we deal with others. Silence is also about how we deal with ourselves. In fact, one of the greatest gifts of silence is that it keeps us connected to who we truly are. You see, the world today is so noisy. Notifications, conversations, arguments, constant activity. Our minds are drowning in voices that are not our own. We hear what society says we should be. We hear what friends expect us to be. We hear what critics tell us we cannot be. And in the middle of all this noise, we lose touch with the most important voice, the voice within us. Silence, my friends, is what reconnects us to that voice. Think about it. When was the last time you sat quietly without your phone, without music, without talking, just still? In those moments of silence, something magical happens. At first, the mind keeps running in circles. Thoughts jump around like monkeys. But slowly, as the silence deepens, those thoughts settle. And then you begin to hear something deeper. Your heart begins to whisper. Your inner wisdom begins to rise. And suddenly, you realize that the answers you were seeking outside were always within you. But you could not hear them because life was too noisy. Silence is not emptiness. It is a doorway to your true self. Let me share an example. There was once a businessman who was always restless. He worked day and night, always chasing goals, always worried about the next deal. One day, exhausted, he visited a monastery and asked the monk, Why do I feel so lost? I have everything: money, family, success. But I still feel disconnected from myself. The monk smiled and handed him a bowl of water stirred with mud. He said, "Look into this bowl. Can you see your reflection?" The man said, "No, master, the water is too muddy." The monk placed the bowl down and told him to wait. Slowly, the mud began to settle and the water became clear. The monk said, "This is your mind. You are always stirring it with noise, with activity, with endless running. You cannot see yourself. But if you allow silence, everything settles and you can finally see who you are." Isn't that such a powerful reminder, my friends? Silence keeps us connected to ourselves because it gives us space to reflect. When we remain silent, we can ask ourselves, am I living the life I truly want? Am I being true to my values, or am I just following the crowd? Am I at peace, or am I hiding behind distractions? These questions don't come in the middle of noise. They come only in the stillness of silence. And when we face these questions honestly, we find alignment. We begin to live not according to others' expectations, but according to our own truth. Even in our relationships, silence helps us connect with ourselves. When someone provokes us, silence gives us the space to check our emotions. Instead of instantly reacting with anger, silence lets us ask, why am I feeling this way? What is really hurting me? What do I actually want from this relationship? By listening to ourselves in silence, we stop being slaves to our emotions and start becoming masters of them. We understand our needs better, we express them better, and we live with more awareness. And my dear friends, silence also connects us to something beyond ourselves. When we sit in silence, we realize we are not just a body running around in this noisy world. We are a soul, a consciousness, a being far deeper than we usually recognize. In silence, we experience peace that no achievement can give and joy that no possession can match. Silence is the bridge between our outer world and our inner world. And when that bridge is strong, life feels whole, balanced, and meaningful. So remember this: without silence, we are disconnected from our heart, from our wisdom, from our very essence. But with silence, we come home to ourselves. And when you are connected to yourself, you walk with clarity, you speak with purpose, and you live with peace. My dear friends, never run away from silence. Embrace it. Because silence is not loneliness. Silence is the meeting place where you finally reconnect with you. My dear friends, silence is not just a habit, not just a response. It is the language of the wise. Throughout history, the greatest sages, saints, philosophers, and enlightened beings have all emphasized the power of silence. Why? Because they understood that wisdom does not always need words. In fact, many times, wisdom speaks best through silence. Words can confuse, words can be misunderstood, words can be twisted, but silence is pure. Silence is universal. Silence carries no lies, no exaggeration, no ego. It is the language of the wise because it expresses truth in the most powerful way, without saying anything at all. Think of the great teachers of the past. The Buddha often remained silent when asked deep questions about the mysteries of life. People would press him, saying, "Why don't you answer?" But his silence was not ignorance. It was the highest answer, because he knew some truths cannot be captured in words. They must be realized in silence. Isn't it true that sometimes the more we talk about something sacred, the less sacred it feels? But when we sit in silence, we experience it directly. This is why the wise use silence. They know silence leads us to experience, not just information. There is a story of a disciple who came to a master and asked, "Master, what is truth?" The master simply smiled and closed his eyes in silence. The disciple grew restless. He said, "Why won't you tell me?" The master finally opened his eyes and said, "If you want me to fill your cup, you must first empty it. Your mind is too noisy to hear truth. Sit in silence, and truth will reveal itself to you." My dear friends, isn't that so profound? Silence itself becomes the teacher, and in that silence, wisdom blossoms. Silence is also the language of the wise because it shows maturity. A wise person does not waste words. They don't argue endlessly. They don't rush to prove themselves. They understand that truth does not need defense. It stands strong on its own. When the ignorant shout, the wise remain silent, and that silence itself exposes ignorance. You see, when someone wise stays quiet, it doesn't mean they don't know. It means they know more than enough, that arguing is pointless and silence is far more powerful. Even in our own lives, we can see this. Think about the people you truly respect. Are they the ones who talk the most, argue the most, shout the most? Or are they the ones who are calm, who speak less, but when they speak, every word feels heavy, meaningful, wise? Their wisdom comes not just from their words, but from the silence behind their words. Silence gives weight to speech. Without silence, words are noise. With silence, words become wisdom. My dear friends, silence is also the language of the wise because it is deeply connected to humility. The more a person knows, the more they realize how little can truly be said. An arrogant person feels the need to display everything they know, but a wise person understands that real knowledge is beyond words. This humility makes them silent. And in that silence, people feel their depth, their presence, their wisdom. Isn't it true that sometimes just sitting in the presence of a wise person, even if they say nothing, can change you? That is because silence is their language, and in that silence, wisdom is transmitted. Finally, silence is the language of the wise because it points us toward peace. The wise know that arguments win battles, but silence wins hearts. The wise know that words can divide, but silence unites. The wise know that shouting shows insecurity, but silence shows confidence. And so they choose silence, not because they are weak, but because they are strong. Not because they don't know, but because they know too much. Not because they are empty, but because they are full. So, my dear friends, remember this: when you choose silence, you are choosing the path of the wise. You are saying, "I will not waste my energy in noise. I will not let anger rule me. I will not try to prove what needs no proof. I will let silence speak for me." And in that silence, you will discover wisdom, dignity, and peace. Silence is the language of the wise, and when you learn to speak it, the world will hear you more deeply than it ever could through words. My dear friends, today we have journeyed through the power of silence together. We began by realizing that silence is not weakness. It is strength. It is the shield that prevents escalation, the space that gives us clarity, the balm that heals wounds, and the language of the wise that needs no words. When we practice silence, we protect our peace, we protect our relationships, and most importantly, we protect our dignity. Silence is not about losing, it is about choosing. Choosing not to be dragged into the noise. Choosing not to give energy to negativity. Choosing peace over pride, wisdom over reaction, love over ego. In life, we cannot control what others say or do, but we can always control our response. And sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Because silence speaks louder than anger, it speaks deeper than arguments, and it speaks clearer than words ever can. When you choose silence, you are not just avoiding conflict, you are rising above it. You are saying, I value peace more than proving myself. And that, my dear friends, is true strength. So the next time someone provokes you, mocks you, disrespects you, or misunderstands you, ask yourself, will my words bring peace or fire? And if the answer is fire, choose silence. Because silence is not empty, it is full of wisdom, full of strength, full of peace. Remember, silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of self-control. May we all learn the art of silence. May we use it not to escape life, but to elevate life. And may our silence become our greatest voice, the voice of peace, wisdom, and love. Thank you.